Hi, my name's Finley Todhunter and this is my 24 fishing 3 rods on one spot. So you join us here today down at Linear Fisheries. We're actually on Oxlease Lake, which has got a good stock of carp. The fishery is quite busy and popular today, but we're going to have a walk down the bank, see if we can find a swim, and with the weather that's moving in over the next 24 hours, I'm sure we're going to be able to get a couple of bites. So we're going back down to that swim where I put the bucket down earlier. I did see a couple of fish down in front of that swim. I've walked further down the bank. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, although it is a weekday, it is extremely busy and I can't get right on top of a fish, but I have seen 2 fish short in this swim, so I think this is going to be the perfect start to start our session. I'm back in the swim where I put that bucket down. I've been sat here for around 10 or 15 minutes and I've seen quite a few fish showing the area. So I'm not going to waste any more time. The time is currently 11:15, so without further ado, my 24 starts now. So I'm currently finding a spot out there. There's still quite a few fish in the area and I don't want to spook them. So what I'm doing is I'm just chucking out a bare lead on my spod rod and trying to find a nice comfortable range to fish 3 rods accurately over bait. It's really important when fishing day ticket venues like this to make sure that you're baiting up and fishing as effectively as possible. And in a day like today, we've got quite a strong crosswind and I think if I was to fish out in the middle, I wouldn't be able to fish accurately enough. So yeah, I've done a few chucks with this lead. It's nice and clear out there, so I'm going to pick a nice comfortable range, put a bit of bait out, and yeah, we'll go from there. Whenever you're fishing 3 rods on one spot, it's really important to make sure that you take your time and that you find a nice clear area of lake bed where you know your rigs are going to be presented as effectively as possible. So when I'm doing this style of fishing, I look for a nice clear area. I do this by using a leaden rod, and when casting out the lead, I'll feel the lead down to the bottom. When the lead hits the bottom, if it goes down with a nice firm donk, I know that I've landed on an area of either gravel or silt. If I'm casting into weed, it will go down nice and soft. However, when you pull the lead back, there'll be a lot of resistance and you know that this area isn't going to be the place where you want to fish. However, when dragging the lead over gravel, you get short sharp taps onto the rod tip and you know that the area of the lake bed is nice and clear. And the same again when pulling the lead over silt, you'll have a little bit of resistance but it will come back nice and smooth, and again this is a perfect area for presenting your rigs. Fishing 3 rods on a spot is great, but it isn't a tactic that will work at all venues. When I say this, I mean I wouldn't turn up to Burfield and fish 3 rods tight on a spot and spod over the top. When I'm looking for a venue to do this style of fishing, I look for lakes that's got a decent stock of carp where there's going to be a natural competition for food and I can get a response going on the deck and I'll be able to build up a big hit of carp. Before turning up to a venue, I'll always do a bit of research. There's so much out on social media now. There's YouTube videos, Facebook, Instagram, catch reports, and you can build up a good picture on a venue. So before I turn up to a venue where I've fished before or where I've never been before, I'll make sure to find out as much information as possible. So when I'm going to that venue, I've got a clear idea what my tactics are going to be for that session. So when I rock up, I can just get on, crack on and catch a few fish. I love fishing 3 rods on the spot because it gives you a good chance of building up a big hit of fish, especially fishing venues such as linear where there's a good stock of carp. Fishing 3 rods on the spot over a nice tight bed of bait. For me personally, there's nothing more exciting than getting a lot of fish in the net, getting something going, keeping active, getting the bobbins bouncing and catching plenty of carp. After seeing a few fish show in the area, I decided it would be best off to take my time setting up and just flick out a couple of singles. This is a tactic that can work really well when you see showing fish. I put them out there and they're probably out for about an hour, but unfortunately nothing really happened. So what I decided to do was change my tactics and put a couple of spods out over the rods. As my third spod hit the water, the middle rod let out a couple of bleeps and we were into the first fish of the session. I was there frantically reeling in the spod as the middle rod was ripping off and we were able to catch a lovely linear to kickstart the 24. And how's about that to start my 24 down here on Oxlease? I persevered with the singles for a few hours, but to be honest, nothing was really happening. So what I decided to do was put 3 spoms over the top just to try and draw the fish into the area. And literally, as the third spod hit the water, my middle rod pulled up tight and we're away with this beautiful little mirror. There's still a few fish showing in the area, so I'm gonna get this one slip back, put a few more spoms out and hopefully it won't be the last. Now that I've caught a fish off that spot, I'm confident that more and more fish are going to return to the spot looking for more bait. So what I'm going to do once this weather moves out the way, I'm going to redo the rods and I'm going to introduce a little bit more bait onto the spot and try and get the spot established moving into the evening, and fingers crossed we'll be able to get a few more fish into the night. It's still raining, but it's eased off enough for me to get the motivation to leave the bivvy, get the rods reeled in and have a little bit of a freshen up. I think it's really important when you're fishing busy day tickets such as linear, if you feel like you should have had a bite, to be honest, you should have had a bite. So I'm going to reel in these rods now, have a freshen up, get new rigs on there, new hook bait, get them back out on the spot, and then I'm going to put a few more spods over the area, just enough to try and draw them fish back into the area and get another bite. I'm just in the process of getting these other 2 rods ready to be put back out on the spot. I'm just putting a couple of fresh hook baits on, and at the start of the session I put 3 different hook bait colours out there. The reason I do this is so I can sort of figure out what's working on the day, and the bite that I had on earlier was on yellow. So what I've decided to do with these other 2 rods, I'm going to incorporate the same colour into the hook bait. So on one rod I've got a 12mm Scopex squid wafter topped off with a little bit of plastic corn, and on the other one I've got a 12mm yellow Scopex squid pop-up. And all I'm going to do with this is trim it down a little bit, put a little bit of lead wire in it and fish it wafter style. I think this is going to give me the best chance of getting a big hit of fish tonight, as I caught on it earlier and it's a colour that works really well on this lake and I've got massive confidence in using. I'm just about to rechuck the rods back out onto the spot, but I'm doing a couple of different things to make sure that I'm fishing as accurately and as efficiently as possible. So the first thing that I'm doing is I haven't picked a spot right out in the middle of the lake. I could have found a spot right out in the middle of the lake, but with the crosswind that we've got, I feel like my accuracy could have been hindered. So I've picked a nice comfortable range where I'm sure I'll be able to hit the clip every single time. Next, I've picked a tree line marker on the far side, so when I'm aiming towards this, whether it's day or night, providing that I hit the clip perfectly, my rigs are going to be presented nice and tight on the spot. When you're doing this style of fishing and you're fishing 3 rods on a spot, it's the most important thing to make sure that all 3 rods are as tight and as close as possible, because if you've got 3 hook baits presented in an area the size of a bin lid, you've got a much greater chance of a pickup rather than fishing an area the size of a tennis court. So taking them few things that I've just mentioned there, standing in the same spot and aiming towards a tree line marker, I can guarantee that you'll be fishing as effectively and as accurately as possible. So without further ado, let's get these rigs back out on the spot. I think quite a few people have put off the idea of fishing 3 rods tight over bait. It can be tricky and it's something that you've got to practice over time, and for them people who have tried it and might not have had much success, the thing that I can recommend is just go out there, keep practicing, and when you're out there, work your socks off. It isn't a tactic where you just fling the rods out and hope for the best. You've got to constantly work and force for the next bite. Yeah, she is on the dance floor with the best clothes ever. Yeah. This is the mix that I've been using on this session down on Oxlease, and it's a mix that I've got 100% confidence in, and I take it to pretty much any day ticket venue where I'm going to be fishing 3 rods on the spot. It consists of a few different ingredients, and I'm going to run through why I use them and how I use them now. So starting off, I've got hemp in the mix. Hemp's a great particle for covering the bottom and keeping the fish grubbing about. Since I'm fishing on a really tight spot, it will keep the fish grubbing about, and since I've got 3 hook baits there, it increases the chance of my hook bait being picked up. Next, I've got sweet corn in there. I've got this more for a visual element, as if there's any fish passing over the spot, they'll notice the sweet corn and hopefully they'll be intrigued and they'll go down and have a bit of a feed. Also, sweet corn is really cheap and a lot of anglers use it, so carp will recognise this as a great food source. Next, I've added 12mm Scopex grid boilies. Now, to be honest, there isn't a carp that swims in these lakes that don't love a boilie, so I've added a good few handfuls of boilies into this mix, and this also gives me an option to use as a hook bait. In addition to the boilies, I'm also using Scopex grid flake. Now, flake's great for holding the fish in the area and keeping them grubbing around on the bottom for a period of time. So the only time I wouldn't add flake into this mix is if there is a strong crosswind or strong undertow, is when I'm spodding out there and wanting to make sure that all the bait's landing directly on top of the rigs. Now, flake's a great bait, as I've mentioned, but it sinks quite slowly, and if there is a wind, it will just drift off the spot, meaning that I'm not baiting as accurate as I want. Finally, I'm adding Scopex grid syrup into the mix. I'm using this just to draw more fish into the area by increasing the attraction of the spod mix, and if there's any fish sort of passing above the area, hopefully they'll smell the liquid and will be drawn onto having a little feed on the spot. So that's the mix that I'm using on this session, but just as important is the equipment that you're going to be using when you're putting the bait out onto the spot. So to start off with, you want to be using a rod that's designed for the job. Here I've got the dot spod, and this is perfect for punching the spod right out onto the spot every single time. You don't want to be using your old carp fishing rod or spare rod. You want to be using something that's designed for the job, something that's strong, reliable, and it's going to be able to punch that weight out onto the clip. I'm then using a shock leader. This is really important because, as I mentioned, when you're filling up the spod, it's going to be quite heavy. You're looking at around 4 to 5 ounces, and the last thing you want to be doing is cracking off and knocking someone out on the other bank. This shock leader is then attached to braid. I like to use braid when spodding because it's a low diameter, which makes it a lot easier when you're casting because there's less friction going through the eyes. When using a shock leader or braid, there's no stretch, and this can increase the chance of cutting your finger. So it's really important to make sure that you're wearing a finger stole or some form of glove, because trust me, from personal experience, if you cut your finger, it will just ruin your session. Finally, the dot spod. Now this is what I've been using on this session to make sure that I'm getting the bait out there in a straight line every single time. Now the thing that I like about the dot spod the most is how easy it is to use. You can simply open it up with one hand, scoop the bait in, shut it back up with one hand and get the bait back out there as quick as possible. The best thing about this is you're actually keeping your casting hand clean, so you're not covering the rod up in bait. So that's the bait and the baiting up tools that I've been using on this session, and using this equipment in my angling has made spodding that much easier, more enjoyable and most importantly more efficient, making sure that I'm getting them spods out on the spot every single time. So my 60-second top tip is, when you're baiting up over your fishing rods, it's really important that you're just as accurate with your baiting as you are with your fishing rods. There's no point of fishing 3 rods nice and tight on a spot if your baiting up isn't going to be as accurate. Now, nobody's perfect. A spod might go left, a spod might go right, or you might not even hit the clip at all. So when I'm spodding, if it does look like it's going a little bit wrong, I'll simply slow the spod down with my hand on the spool, flick the bail arm over, and I'll pull the spod out of the sky and let it land in the margin. I'd much rather have the bait landing close and feed the swans than have little clusters of bait here, there and everywhere all around the spot, because that's completely defeating the object of fishing 3 rods nice and tight over a bed of bait. So we're now 10 hours into the session. I got the rods out for the evening, and to be honest, I had a sneaky feeling that it wasn't going to be too long until we got a bite. The guy next door, he's just caught one, and funnily enough, as I'm playing this one, the guy opposite's also playing a fish, so they're clearly still in the area. And yeah, middle rods just pulled up tight. I put a few spods out maybe about an hour ago, so it has taken them a little bit longer to get on the bait. But nevertheless, like I said, we've got that spot established now, so as soon as this one goes into the net, I'll get 3 spods back out onto the spot, and hopefully we can keep a consistency up this time. Yes, number 2. That will do. So I've secured the second fish into the net now, I've unhooked her, and I'm going to get that rod straight back out on the spot. It's really important when you're doing this style of fishing that you want to get the consistency up so you can build a big hit of fish, and it's clear that on the bait now is the guy opposite also playing a fish, so I don't want to waste any time. I'm going to get that rod wrapped back up, back out on the spot, and a few more spods just to keep the fish in the area. Once you've got the rods out on the spot and you've baited up accurately and you're feeling confident, you know, it could be quite easy to think, you know what, I'm just going to go on my phone, watch a few videos. But the thing is, once them rods are out, you're working 24/7. You're constantly watching the water, trying to figure out, is the fish in the area? Have they eaten some of the bait? Do I need to change my hook bait? And you're constantly thinking, what do I need to do next to try and get that bite? For example, last night it was absolutely chucking it down with rain. There was no one out there spodding, but me personally, there was a few fish showing in the area, and I thought, I'm going to go out there, put a few spods out there and just try and draw the fish into the area. You've got to be constantly thinking on your toes, what can I do to get that next bite? And working your socks off 24/7, I can guarantee you, will make you catch more carp than the person fishing next to you. Well, that shows the importance of making sure that you get the rod straight back out on the spot. It's only been in the water for about 10 minutes and it's away again. We've still got that fish in the net and there's plenty of fish showing in the area. So like I said, it just shows the importance of making sure that you don't waste any time and that you maximise on the time when the fish are in the swim. As it could simply take 2 or 3 seconds and the fish could do that off. So I want to maximise on it, and as soon as this fish goes into the net, I'm not going to take them out for photos. I'm going to get this rod clipped back up, fresh rig on, back out there, and a few more spods over the top. Got it? That'll be a bite. Well, would you believe it? We were just about to get that first fish out. We've got a second one in the net. and the other rod is just absolutely one-toned. And we're attached into another Oxlease carp. Yeah, always make sure you've got about 10 nets set up. Just on that shelf, I think. Don't make a who. Well, as you can see, the last half an hour or so, it's been absolute carnage. It's 10:30 now, and if it carries on like this, I'm sure that we're going to have a busy night ahead. We've only got one rod left out on the spot, and you never know, that might rip off. But I think what we're going to do now is get all these fish out on the mat, get photos of them, put them back, get 3 more spods out on the spot, and fingers crossed we're going to have an action-packed night. Well, check that stunning coming out. It's been a hectic hour down here on Oxlease. I've managed 4 bites, landing 3 of them, with this stunning common being one of them. I've got a couple more fish in the net to show you guys, and I'm going to get these fish slipped back. It definitely seems that swapping all hook baits to being yellow has paid off, so I'm going to make sure that all the rods that go back out there are yellow, and fingers crossed that action is going to continue into the night as it shows no signs of slowing down. And there's the final one to put back. It certainly looks like we're getting on the bait now, and fingers crossed the bobbins are going to carry on bouncing throughout the night. Accuracy, it's probably a word that you're all sick of hearing by now, but it is one of, if not the most important thing when it comes to fishing day ticket venues and doing the style of fishing that I've been doing on this 24. Fishing venues such as linear where there's a good stock of carp, the carp tend to move around in a shoal, and if they turn up on your spot and you've got 3 rigs presented perfectly over bait, odds on one of them rigs are going to get a bite and you're going to be able to catch a fish. But if you're only to have 1 rig on that spot, them carp could turn up, clear your bait in seconds, do your rig over, and you've wasted an opportunity. So making sure that you've got 3 rods bang on the money with plenty of bait over the top, but just enough to get a bite, I think is key in this style of fishing. Well, good morning. The weather's still miserable today, but I've woke up this morning and I've seen a few fish over the spot, so they're definitely still in the area. Last night, after them few fish, I made sure that I cast right towards that tree line marker to get the rods bang on the money, but for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. So I've woke up this morning, and what I've decided to do is reel all 3 rods in. I'm going to put 3 fresh hook baits out, get them all bang on the money, a few spods over the top. We've got 6 hours remaining of the session, so fingers crossed by doing this, we'll be able to nick a couple of bites before we have to go. And now Oxlease is known for doing morning bites, and most people would have left the rods out from the night and try and nick one that way throughout the morning feeding spell. But deep down I felt like I should have had a bite, so I got the rods back out there, and around 10 or 15 minutes after doing that I managed to get the first bite of the morning. Unfortunately the hook pulled, but I wasted no time at all making sure that I got the rod back out on the spot. In this style of fishing, it's absolutely key that you get the rods back out there so you can make the most of that short feeding spell. That's exactly what I done. I got the rod back out there, and shortly after I was rewarded with the first fish of the morning. Unfortunately, it did pick up a trailer, so one of the cameramen came in and helped me out, and while I was sorting that fish out, the other rod that was on the spot also ripped off, and I was able to bag another one. When doing this style of fishing, things can get hectic, and it can get hectic pretty quick. So you want to make sure that you know where everything is, you want to be organised and have everything to hand. The last thing you want to be doing is netting a fish, turning around, you can't find your leads, your bait needles went missing, you can't find your spare rigs, because if you're doing that, you're simply wasting time. The fish in here, they move around in a shoal, and when they're on you, they might only be on you for 10-15 minutes, and you want to make the most of that opportunity. So making sure that you've got everything prepared, a couple of rigs baited up, ready to go, so when you net that fish, you can quickly change the rig, get it back out in seconds, and make the most of that short feeding spell. Check that stunner out. It's got to be one of the best looking carp of the session so far. It was part of a manic feeding spell. I've also got another one in the net to show you. And yeah, it seems like they're certainly getting on the bait, and it just shows if you feel like you should have had a bite, make sure to reel them rods in, get fresh hook bait on, back out on the spot and bait up accurately, and you can get results just like this one. So I'm going to get this one slipped back, get them rods back out, and fingers crossed we'll get one more before our 24 is up. And here's the second one of that little brace. I've got one rod back out on the spot, and I'm not going to waste any more time, and we're going to get the other rods back out on the spot, and let's see how many more we can get before our time runs out. So this is the rig that I've been using down here on my session, and it's a rig that I use in 95% of my angling. So starting on the main line, I've got 12-pound main line, and this goes straight down to a lead clip. I'm not using any leader because there's a bit of weed in the margin, and I feel like if I use a leader I'll probably catch up on it, and I don't want to be losing fish in the edge. On the lead clip, I've been dropping the leads on this session, again just because there's a bit of weed in the edge, and I feel like dropping the lead will just help me get the fish up in the water and help me land them carp. Then I'm using a quick change swivel, and this will allow me to quickly change the rigs once I get the fish in the net, keeping it efficient and making sure that I get the rod straight back out there. I've then got an anti-tangle sleeve. It's in the name, this is to stop tangles, and it also just covers up that quick change swivel nicely. I've then got a hook link of around 8 to 9 inches of skin link, and by the hook I've just uncoated it a little bit just to add that extra bit of movement. I'm using a size 4 twister hook, and on the eye of the hook I've got a little bit of shrink tube, and this will just help the hook turn once the fish picks up the rig. I'm then using a bit of silicone on the shank of the hook to act a bit like a blowback. So basically when I reel this in, if it's being pushed back and I haven't caught a fish, I know there's fish out in the area and I can act accordingly. On this rig I'm using a 12mm Scopex squid wafter, and on top I've got a little bit of plastic corn. Whenever I start the session I'll carry a range of hook baits with me, so when I put the rods out on the spot I can play around with colours and find out what's working, and on this session it's been yellow. So this rig is super simple to tie, and it's something that I've got 100% confidence in. I feel like these days most people overcomplicate the rigs, but to be honest they need to keep it nice and simple so they can focus on the more important things such as location. When I'm turning up to a lake, the last thing I want to be thinking about is my pop-up balanced, or is the rig gonna turn? I want to cast out something super simple and reliable, and that's exactly what this rig's going to do for me. Once I get this out on the spot, I'm confident that once them rods are out on the money, it won't be too long until the bobbins start bouncing. So the rods are back out on the spot, and as you can probably see, all 3 lines are running directly parallel to the spot because I'm fishing on such a tight area. Now when you're fishing on such a small spot, it can be quite tricky and deceiving as to if you've crossed over your rigs when you're casting, but there's one simple thing that you guys can do to make sure that you're fishing effectively, accurately, and that you haven't crossed over your rigs. So once you've got the rods out there and you've put them on the rest, simply grab all 3 rod tips together and move them together. Then line yourself up with your rod tips to your spot, and I can see here that the lines are nicely splayed out so they're not crossed over. When I let go, they're all running directly parallel, and as I mentioned, whether there's a bit of wind or undertow, it can look like maybe one of your rods has crossed over. So simply just bringing the tips together like this, make sure that you're fishing effectively and that your rigs aren't tangled. Well, it's 10:45, which means it's the end of my 24, and what a great session it's been down here at Linear. We came down yesterday onto Oxlease and we found a decent peg where there was a few fish showing. We found a nice spot aiming towards a tree on the far side. We managed to present 3 rigs nice and tight over the top with a little bit of bait, and we've been able to get quite a few bites. But yeah, I hope you guys have learned a thing or two and build the confidence for when you're fishing busy day tickets such as Linear on how to get the very best out of your swim and fish as accurate as possible. But as I mentioned, that's the end of the session now, so I'm going to get these rods reeled in and head for home.